Good evening, good night, everyone. And according to my watch, it is now 7 o'clock, and I want us to get started on this interesting night. My name is Kesley Cambridge, and I am the local chapter coordinator in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for Carryman. And before we get into the whole meat of the matter, I'm not the moderator, so I would hand over to Colville in a moment. But just to let you guys know what Carryman is for those persons who don't know, Carryman is a regional network of individuals and organizations in the Caribbean region working on transforming masculinities and engaging men and boys to promote equality. Now, just to give you a brief, very brief history of Carryman, the brainchild of this organization, Dr. Peter Weller, Jamaican born, living in Trinidad. In 2006, he would have seen the need for the continued talk about men issues. And there was a man's talk in Jamaica at the time, and he saw the need where more things needed to be done. And as the years went on, we would have seen that this organization was established in 2010. It was legally incorporated in Trinidad and Tobago. And by 2011, it had expanded its network to 12 Caribbean countries, including Belize. So Carryman right now has been doing a lot of work. We were just wrapping up our symposium, and we would be definitely looking forward to working with St. Vincent and the Grenadines in promoting different men's issues and highlighting and empowering men. Was partnered with the Mental Health Rehabilitation Center of Health, and we saw the need to collaborate with this ministry, given that tomorrow would be recognized as International Men's Day. And as we gear up and get ready to celebrate this day tomorrow, we saw it fit to get the discussion started now. And we know the importance of mental health in men. And before I get even deeper into that conversation, I would hand over to Mr. Colville Thorpe, who is our moderator, and he will take us through tonight's proceedings. So thank you all who have already logged in, and we hope to have a fruitful discussion tonight. Over to you, Colville.
Thank you so much, Kesley, for your kind words of introduction. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I would also like to say thank you to the Mental Health Rehabilitation Center and Carryman for affording me this opportunity tonight to moderate tonight's proceedings. I also at this time want to extend a masculine, whatever that's supposed to mean, a masculine welcome to everybody that is listening in tonight. I'm excited and waiting eager anticipation concerning tonight's proceedings. I read an interesting statistic recently that said, from the United States, that said, if you are under the age of 45, the thing that you're most likely to die from is suicide. And that was an eye-opener for me. And it speaks to our topic for tonight, men and mental health, the silent crisis. And without further ado, I'll go into introducing our first presenter, and we will take it from there. Our first presenter tonight is Mr. Hanif Benjamin. Mr. Hanif Benjamin is a Trinidadian and a qualified clinical therapist and clinical traumatologist. Mr. Benjamin holds a clinical master's of social work with distinction in New York City, receiving summa cum laude, and a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice, summa cum laude, at Monroe College. He also holds certification in clinical traumatology from the Traumatology Institute of Canada and a certification in child trauma. Mr. Benjamin is currently a doctoral student of social work at the University of the West Indies and is a senior adjunct lecturer and tutor in the Department of Behavioral Sciences at COSTAT, the University of the Southern Caribbean, and the University of the West Indies. Mr. Benjamin is a licensed Master of Social Work, licensed by the New York State Office of the Professions, and a member of the American Academy of Experts in Trauma Stress and the National Center for Crisis Management. is also the founder, president, and chief executive officer of the Center for Human Development Group of Companies Limited. With skills in clinical services, human and educational services, and training and development, Mr. Benjamin is intensively engaged in fighting the stigma of mental health and child and youth advocacy. He also works with high-risk families that are more susceptible to negative societal influences, such as, but not limited to, traumatic situations of domestic violence, sexual abuse, drugs and substance abuse, and also homicide. So at this time, I present to you Mr. Hanif Benjamin.
Pleasant good evening to you, Mr. Thorpe, and to Mr. Cambridge, and to all from around the world. I'm not sure where we have people from. However, I am extending greetings to all people from around the world. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you this beautiful evening here in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not sure what the weather is like on your end, but it is a beautiful evening here in Trinidad and Tobago. And for those of you who do not have a beautiful evening, I extend a Trinidad beautiful evening to you. It is always a pleasure when I am invited to these forums where I can delineate with you on topics of great importance. And this topic, before I continue, is there any way we can get the notification to be silent by chance? Because I know that you have a million people who want to come in tonight because this is exciting stuff.
Sorry about that, Hanif. We're working on that immediately. Apologies, we're working on that right now.
No problem. And so the theme of this evening is a critical one that I have spoken about extensively, not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but other places as well, because it's something that I have found to be quite interesting throughout my studies and my work both in New York, the Caribbean, and here in Trinidad and Tobago. And the theme of this evening's topic, spoke to men and mental health, and speaking about the silent killer. And I beg to disagree. With the term silent, because I consider this to be loud. I consider this to be very loud. I consider, when you look at the murder-suicide rate in Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and other parts of the Caribbean, at the hands of men, I consider that to be loud. When you look at the domestic violence rate throughout the Caribbean, I consider it to be loud. When you look at substance use and substance abuse, I consider it to be loud. When you look at boys and the way boys are cultured, I consider it to be loud. When you look at the alarming rate of young men being incarcerated from a juvenile perspective all the way up to big jail throughout the Caribbean, I consider it to be loud. And when you put all of these things together, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is a real loud noise, a cry even when we speak to men and mental health. And we cannot speak to men and mental health unless we look at the entire continuum of care from childhood all the way up to adulthood. Because it is very rare, very, 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 very rare that the beginning starts in adulthood. It is extremely rare that the beginning starts in adulthood. Most of what we see in the adult life has its nexus in childhood. Most studies have said it to us. Dr. Nadine Burke, in her book, The Deepest Well, spoke to Kaiser and what she found when she did a study on children and trauma. And it is alarming that when you look at the ASA studies that look at childhood traumatic events and how the adult is living, we see very clear indicators that because of what occurred in childhood has now or is now manifesting itself in adulthood. Jeffrey Canada from the Harlem Children's Zone in New York, a man who has done great things with young people in the inner city, New York, in Harlem there, spoke about the man box. And I want to talk about that for just a brief moment. Because you see, in order for us to understand men and mental health, we must understand the beginning. And nobody has put it in a greater perspective as Jeffrey did when he spoke to the man box. What is the man box? Anybody here could tell me what am I referring to when I talk about the man box? Anybody? All 52 million of us on this here.
I can try.
Tell me.
I can try. It's how society or how men have been boxed in with the limitations and the corners of what masculinity is and what masculinity should be. And we've not been able to implement and move beyond that box. We want what people perceive masculinity should be.
100%. If this was an exam, I would have given you 9 out of 10, only because I don't give 10 out of 10 that easily. You see? You would have gotten a 9 out of 10. And you are quite correct, Mr. Langdon, because let me tell you this. When you look at the man box, we see how we as a society, especially in the Caribbean diaspora region, we place boys in a particular pattern, one that speaks to bashing of emotions. So you're not allowed to show emotions. You are not allowed to express yourself. You are not allowed to feel. You are not allowed to say and to come to anybody and say, yo, I feel this way. And so when I look at adult male who has gone down a path of violence or a path of substance abuse, and you ask them what's really going on, say, but I don't know, this is how I have learned to cope. Because anything else is frowned upon. Very rarely a man will walk up to you and say, I am burning inside. I am hurting. I am emotional. Because we were, as a child, thought that, hey, that is not what you do. And we know the names we were called. We couldn't fall down and cry. We couldn't feel depressed and say to your mother or your father, especially your father, I feel depressed, I feel sad. They say, go outside and kick a ball. Go and climb a tree. Stop being a sissy. We know that is what was told to us growing up as boys. And so when you look at that man box that was created for us, men or boys were placed in there, and somewhere along the line, when you were taught by abusive men that that is how you have power and control, or when you were taught by over-aggressive mothers how to defend, when you reach 18 years, they want a perfect young man to go and marry somebody's daughter. And it always baffles me that you want a praying mantis at the age of 18 when I have never seen you pray. You want a young man who has emotion and can be there for his wife and his children, when that has not been the household that he grew in. You want a young man who can be expressive and talk about what is bothering him, whether it is on work or not, but yet you were never taught to express yourself, because the sheer expression of self was seen as weak. And so society boxed men into this thing, this box, and it said to us that, hey, this is what needs to happen. This is how you must live. And so when you put mental health on top of that, as a matter of fact, while this topic is mental health, I am just going to say health in general. Because you guys on this chat, you know full well that in order for you to pick up yourself, to go by any doctor, you have to be near dead. Very few men will wake up a morning and say, you know what, I feel I'm going to get a checkup this year. How many of us have not even started, even though we have gotten to the age of going and checking colon and all these kind of things, we have not even started that journey. Most time when we go to the doctor is because somebody have to drag you across. And so, as men, the whole idea of health and taking care of yourself has been second place. It has never been put on the agenda as a priority. And so if our general health have not been placed on a priority list, what do you think is going to happen for mental health? Mental health being a taboo subject. Mental health being in 2020 a bad word still. A mental health that has not been legislated into most of our regions in terms of progressive way we deal with it. Are we then saying that we are continuing this man box even into adulthood, where men who are living with mental illness, men who are living with stressors, have no avenue where they can get into to seek redress, to get help? Those are some of the basic things that we see in our society today. I have done a seminar in 6 Caribbean countries as a consultancy for the last 2 years. And it gave me a great perspective in terms of boys to men, crime, and mental health. And I'm not sure if you all have seen that there is a serious correlation between men who is sitting in jail, boys who is sitting in juvenile facilities, and their mental well-being. There's a serious correlation. And when I go into prison, like in Trinidad and Tobago, I did a program in every single prison, including the one in the middle of the sea. That was a journey to get there, but we wouldn't go there tonight. When you look at these men, all I saw was diagnoses. And I am saying to myself, which one came first? The substance abuse or the mental health? Which one came first? The substance to help me cope with the mental illness that has been under or missed or nil diagnosed, and my ability to cope with society. We must ask ourselves that. When we see the vagrant, or what I call socially displaced people, when I see our mental facilities, when I see our jails, I see mental illness. So all of these things are tied to from child all the way up to our adulthood. Mental health is real, and mental illness is different from mental health. Because I want you to understand this, and I want you to understand why we move into mental illness. Just like physical health, you have physical good health and you have physical ill health. Mental illness, now we have mental good health and mental ill health. And what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that when you don't treat with mental ill health, it then leads to mental illness. I want you to understand that. So if men are not able to treat with their mental wellness or mental well-being, then what ends up happening here, it goes along the continuum and it ends in mental illness. So what do I mean by that? I mean that these things are treatable. I mean that we can help people get over this. However, if men are not treating with their mental health in general, and it is left unabated, it leads to mental illness. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, are we treating with mental illness as a people, as a Caribbean? Do you think that we are treating with mental illness as a Caribbean? I'll take two responses there. Joseph, what are your thoughts? I think we have a shy bunch tonight. We have a shy bunch tonight. Go ahead, Mr. Langdon.
Well, I feel like we're presenting the same presentation, but in a different way. We're not. In fact, if we are not, you already posited a very good point in your very beginning. If we're not dealing with physical health properly as it relates to men, how can we be dealing with mental health properly? And we're not dealing with mental health correctly or mental illness correctly in the region, the challenges that we see, we know we're not. That's why in the national agenda here, even here in Barbados, for this this Caribbean Wellness initiative, mental health has been the highlighted incident. Yes, the mental impact of COVID-19, but you're right, the suicide rates of men, what causes them, and it's interesting you positive the correlation between crime and violence and mental health. It is there. It is clear. Why are we not addressing it? So you are perfectly correct in your synopsis of the situation.
When you talk about in general mental health, now we have made great strides, even here in Trinidad and Tobago, in the way we see mental health. But we give it a lot of lip service in that we have not actively moved to treating mental health. When mental health treatment is still segregated, when mental health treatment is just more than a prescription, we are still not treating the issue. We are not treating how mental health is treated in a hospital. For example, if one of my clients is, I said, go to Mount Hope because you're having a manic episode, Mount Hope being the hospital. Why are you sitting there for 3 and 4 hours to be admitted? You could imagine somebody with a manic episode who's seeing and hearing voices that never spoke and people that never showed up. And you are sitting, or you are supposed to sit in a waiting room until you're attended to. It means that we have not understood what is mental illness in the real sense. So it means that in order for us to really address this thing, we have to begin to think differently. We have to understand differently. We must say that mental health is real and it must be given the prominence just as physical health is given the prominence. As a matter of fact, I have often said that there is no health without mental health. You cannot segregate the two. You cannot segregate the two. Because let me tell you this, and my greatest pet peeve for those of you who ever heard me speak on this topic before, you can get 80%, how do you call this thing? When you go to the insurance claim, you can claim 80% when you go to your doctor, yeah? In some cases, 100%. So you go to the doctor, you pay $100, you can get back $80 for a medical issue. But if you go to the doctor for a psychiatric or psychological issue, in most cases, it is not covered by insurance. And if it is covered by insurance, it is minuscule. But listen to this. Listen to this. You go for your high blood pressure to be treated, and you are given you're 80% back, but nobody's understanding that the high blood pressure is due to stress that is linked to depression, that is linked to anxiety that you are living with every day. So they are giving you back money for the end result of your challenge, but no one is examining why is this man living with high blood pressure. You can go to your doctor for your back, for your head, for your toe, and they can run a scan. And the doctor said, I'm not seeing anything wrong. But in actuality, they say, go to do a stress test. And when you go to do a stress test, your stress reading is through the roof. But you can get claims for the medical visit. And so it tells me, ladies and gentlemen, that we have not understood mental health by any grand measure. The only time I would be certain that we have understood mental health is when we have created safe space for men, women, and or children to go to. That is not just a prescription mill. I will know you are serious, where in Trinidad I have been advocating every health center, every hospital should be outfitted with clinical social workers, with psychologists and psychiatrists. You shouldn't have to go hunting. You're not, Dora, going to explore to find a mental health practitioner. Just like you know where your medical doctor is, you should be able to find a social worker, a psychologist. That is when I know that we are taking mental health seriously. When we begin to teach our children what is mental illness and teach them coping mechanisms, especially our boys, from very early, then I know that we are serious. When we have changed our legislation, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago to decriminalize suicidality, then I know we are serious. When we have updated and upgraded our equal opportunities laws, then I know we are serious. Ladies and gentlemen, before my time has expired, it is very simple what I want us to understand today. We must look at the beginning in order to effect change at the end. We cannot want our men to be a particular way when they become a man. This journey has to start, it must start from boyhood. You mothers, you fathers, culture your children in a particular way, and then we are not pleased when they grow old. Children didn't grow with a book as to how to maneuver. We teach them this. So you have to ask yourself, have I placed my son, my nephew, in this man box? Have I placed this boy into this man box where I have cut off his ability to express self? Where I have rescinded his emotions, where I have said to him, it is not okay to cry. But yet, at the age of 18, we want a man who is emotionful, he's full of emotions. We want a man who is caring and guiding. In order to get that, we must start from the beginning. So in order for us to achieve men's health in general, let us look at the journey that we have placed our boys on and ask yourself, am I helping or am I hurting? I thank you.
Well, if you enjoyed Mr. Benjamin's presentation, put some claps in the chat box. Put some claps in the chat box. That was an excellent presentation, Mr. Hanif. Really enjoyed it. In order for us to develop good adult men, it must indeed start at childhood. Our next presenter, Mr. Anderson Langdon. Anderson Langdon, at 37 years old, is the youngest appointed executive director of the BFPA, better known as the Barbados Family Planning Association. Having joined in 2009 and rose steadily through its ranks, with an associate degree of arts in the government and political studies and history from Barbados Community College, a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in psychology, with history from the University of the West Indies, Cavell campus, and a Master of Science degree in social psychology from the University of Central Lancashire. Mr. Langdon has driven the reinvigorating of the new BFPA brand, being one of its principal researchers in the work that changed the brand. While at the BFPA, Anderson has been part of many collaborations with regional and international organizations, such as Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV, the Caribbean Family Planning Affiliation, International Planned Parenthood Federation, United Nations Population Fund, United Nations Children's Education Fund, the United Nations Development Program, and the United States Agency for International Development. In addition, as Executive Director of the BFPA, Mr. Langdon increased availability of comprehensive prevention, care, and treatment services, including reliable coverage of care for female sex workers, men who have sex with men, and transgender women, led the establishment of the first HIV and AIDS care and treatment center outside of the public sector, and established and supported infrastructure for support to the range of HIV and AIDS care. With an interest in research on interrogation of prejudice and development of the treated social intervention, a 2011 committee member of the Men Against Domestic Violence White Ribbon Campaign, and as the 2010-2015 Secretary of the National Men's Health Association, and numerous publications and presentations speaking on social issues that can and do affect men in the Caribbean. Mr. Langdon has the insight, experience, and knowledge in ensuring safe spaces for men can be established, supported, and maintained. Mr. Langdon currently serves as ex officio on the executive of Men's Education Network and Support. Before Mr. Langdon speaks, I would like to encourage everybody to get your questions ready. I could tell that we all have burning questions from listening to Mr. Hanif. So get your questions in order so that when we have the Q&A section, we're able to answer as many questions as we can. Mr. Langdon.
Hi, Colville. Thanks. I'm a safe one up. Hanif, no. It's going to be a difficult one. I don't know how I'm going to do this. So let me see if I can share screen. I'm going to do a slightly different presentation to Hanif. Yeah, really impressed. Charting way forward, improving male mental and physical health in the Caribbean region. So when approached with this topic, I thought that really we cannot really attempt to separate mental and physical health, as all are what make us men. And I have to agree that in the context is mental health needs of men in general, specifically, are not being addressed, and mental health needs in the wider Caribbean are not being addressed. We're still, as Hanif said, paying lip service. We've not invested in the infrastructure to get what needs to be done. Sorry. So, with no further ado, I'll start my presentation. I think in the context of mental health in the Caribbean, we need for more research. I find we have a lot of secondary research. We need to discuss the unique historical context that is the Caribbean. slavery and socialization, the role that it would have played in the mental development of the Caribbean context, and so aptly described in the current context, the socialization of young men and young boys in general, as Mr. Hanif alluded to. I think as well, we need to play topics of intimate partner violence, suicide, sex, sexuality, and sexual health within that context. We really need to look at the healthcare management aspect. We need to look at the role of comprehensive sexuality education, addressing some of these needs that are highlighted for men's health, as well as mental health wise. And we need to invest in safe spaces. And I'm going to discuss a unique approach of a male organization, which I'm a member of, Men's. And I think Hanif was right that the context is that we need to make mental health a total aspect of how we deliver care. So what's going on here? Right. Need for greater research. Certainly there's an increase globally of research, but again, not as much as I think we need specifically in main context. Limited rates of crime, medical cause of death, and physical health investment. We've really not done the research that's necessary as it relates to male mental health. It tends to show up in research as correlations or as something that is secondarily investigated, especially with crime and in causes of death. Paramount one being suicide. We need to look at the investment for future male health and wellness mentally. And we've not discussed that in that context. In fact, on the global scale, United Nations identified that there needs to be a concerted effort in male health and in male mental health, because it is clearly lacking on the global as well as the regional agenda. The unique historical context, emotional and psychological trauma that was impacted from slavery. I think that we need to discuss that in context. I think we haven't invested enough time to see how our Caribbean societies were shaped, how violence, how that trauma that even permeated before you're being born are still being perpetuated by you, by your parents or those before you, and how that has led to the impact of how we as men are shaped in terms of our emotions and how we deliver our emotions. We also need to look at how that again has how we view our relationships, how we deal with our relationships, and how that impacts family. Traditional male socialization, we need to look at that as well. I can't speak more congruently as Hanif alluded to, the impacts on attitude to health. We as men have been shaped by our society on how we deal with the emotions, and we've not been shaped in a very positive way. In fact, it's later on in life that it comes to fruition that we have not been socialized in a way that allows us to deal with the emotional impacts that we're currently experiencing. And that has also shaped our attitudes to seek help, attitudes to health in general. And that has again also impacted our relationships. We expect men to, as I say, operate in a context where we have not prepared them for the context of being the leaders of our society or being males in our society. That has changed drastically even in the last 10 to 20 years. But we still going about working or dealing with men in the same context and the same way. We need to change that, which leads my next point: masculinity in our current society. Masculinity, or what it means to be a man, what is needed to be a man, has changed drastically. And have we invested in our men the way to go about it? That is one of my concerns. Sorry. So I wanted to flag suicide. For every woman who dies by suicide, 4 men die. Let's put that in context. And that's really to bring forward the fact that men are not dealing with the issues that are are in front of them correct in a proper manner, and usually seeing suicide as the way or the finality of dealing with these mental health issues. There's a correlation between failed relationships and suicide. Lack of investment in emotional scope and skill in men. Again, I highlight socialization. Men have not been socialized to have discussions the way that society has shaped them. And the reality is we're seeing that manifest in the way men are violent and the way the men go about dealing with difficult situations, and suicide is one of those ways. There are not enough safe spaces for men in terms of that mental context. Sorry, again. I highlighted intimate partner violence. Again, more to show the trauma that is going on with regards to men in society that we haven't addressed as well. Intimate partner is not just a female issue, it's a societal problem that we haven't addressed and continues through society. While male are generally seen as perpetrators of violence, they're also equally, in another context, receivers of violence and abuse. Systems have not addressed emotionally these needs of men equitably, and we're seeing manifestations in male behavior. There are limited male programs for victims and perpetrators nationally, here as well as in the regional context. And it is clear that it is a learned behavior. And that speaks to the way we've been socialized from the historical context. And we need to address this context. This is the only way we're going to bring about the change we want to see, is by understand that these are the issues and we need to address them. Sex and sexuality. I highlighted this based on a briefing that I received. The value of Caribbean virility men place. That is something that is in a physical and in mental health context that we need to discuss. Sex is highly valued by men. Number of partners reared as a badge of honor. The impact of slavery on the view of sex, men viewed as black bulls, and the psychological context in which that continues to permeate men needs to be addressed as well. Trans views of sexuality and masculinity challenges, men are questioning transgender homosexuality and bisexual, different contexts that men need to look at. Sexual health, mental relations as it relates to erectile and sexual dysfunction, prostate disease, all of these things shape the mental, these are things that men worry about and things that need to be discussed in a mental health context and a physical health context. Suicide rates around again in the Caribbean are higher than women. Methods of suicide are more finite, linked to relationship and emotional trauma. Men have limited coping skills and limited psychosocial support. And these are things that we need to address in the mental health context. And I wanted to put the broader score of men's behavior and men in healthcare. 70% of Barbadian men have had bad health-seeking behavior, and similar exists in the total regional context. The main killer of men nationally, Barbados, and regionally, prostate disease. One of the major health concerns of men is erectile dysfunction. Men see themselves as a forgotten third in healthcare. Men engage in risky behaviors, and we really have to look at the impact of alcohol, drug, and harmful substance abuse on mental health. And as Hanif alluded to prior, is it something that you use utilize as a coping skill indirectly? These are things that we need to address in the Caribbean context. Is healthcare as considerate as men as it should be? Men do feel left out in healthcare. Men do feel left out in mental health care. Men feel left out in general. Something that we need to address. I want to speak in the context of how my organization attempted to address some of these health-seeking behaviors. We have done a series of community outreaches because of the national study which indicated the issue of men having bad health-seeking behavior. And from the seminars and from the outreaches, we found out that men felt left out of healthcare. Men felt like they were ostracized by healthcare workers. Men had a fear of medical physicians. Men felt they were not informed enough. Men were not socialized to be regular health seekers. That's from their context. They felt uncomfortable discussing certain health details with female healthcare providers present. Men needs to have more men involved in their healthcare. Sorry. Safe spaces. And I just want to discuss in the context of safe spaces, because what came out, as I said before, is that men felt a need for safe spaces. Men needed to feel a place, an environment where they feel confident, that they're not exposed to discrimination, because the reality is some of the issues that men feel that bother men, they feel that they cannot discuss it with particular persons. They feel that they would be criticized. Some feel they would be harassed, and others feel that they may be emotionally or physically harmed. So the right space, the right healthcare providers, the right mental health infrastructure is what is necessary to address the need for men. All of that, we created our own male clinic because we saw that it's something that we need to address. We offered our own health services. We had follow-up community outreaches to make sure that we were still understanding the mental context of men. Nationally, it led to the creation of some mental health groups within healthcare facilities that felt we're addressing sexual needs of men. And what we also did is that we need to increase sensitization of partners and society as a whole for men. That is something that we wanted to pull out in the context. And mental health being an important part of that. Some of our male clinic services, I'm not going to spend long on that. We try to produce a health package to support men in their context and in their own space. We didn't just want to have the physical health, because we want also to mix the medical as well as the psychological needs. So significant investment in counseling, in development and general health that we felt was necessary. I want to linger here on comprehensive sexuality education, but this is a wider context of the development of a man which is emotionally attuned and equipped with the needs to make decisions as it relates to sex, sexuality, emotional and physical health in general. We have this curriculum which we created that we say young people, but in general mean all people. We believe that there's a context in which we need to invest in educating our men, the context of gender, the context of sexual and reproductive health and HIV, sexual rights, health rights, and sexual citizenship, pleasure, violence, diversity, and relationships. So we believe that in a context that we had to deliver something that particularly catered to men. This organization, in which I'm a member ex officio of, was created specifically to deal with that. And this also came off the context of what we were seeing as it relates to the mental health of men nationally. This was a response to men's emotional needs that we were seeing. It's a year and a half in creation, and it really has some unique programs that specifically cater to men. We wanted to, let me highlight Men's Talk. That's the creation of a safe space where men can have discussion about what is going on with them. What are the challenges that they're experiencing? How can we assist in that? And then out of that talk, we provide counseling support. Well, it's directly to that group, which is a very large group. It also provides national support in terms of the mental health of men. We've also embarked on a mentorship program for younger men, because we realize that the context that men need to develop is somewhat not being looked at for investment. Sorry. So we believe that there need to be safe spaces for different men. We have groups like Equals, LGBT men, men's unions, sports clubs, social groups, and school clubs. What we've opted to is to take an investment in that mental health and we're going to roll up programs which specifically cater to these groups and development of their mental health. I think we also need to really think about creation of a national men's organization in the Barbados context and encourage it in the Caribbean context, because I think, I know, yes, Caribbean in the broader scale, but at the national levels, there need to be some investment, because men understand the emotional needs of men, and we need to support our men as males. Of course, there's always roles for women in the support of men. Let me say that in the development of our programs, women have been great in terms of initiating and helping the context of bridging emotional and physical health support for men. And so basically that is my presentation. And if there are any questions or any queries, I'm prepared for.
Thank you so much, Mr. Langdon, for your presentation. We will be moving right along. Hopefully we have just one more presenter tonight. Mr. Chess Moulton. He's a certified psychotherapist, an international best-selling author, and a certified stress management consultant. He says that mental issues is dear to his heart, and that is how he got started. Mr. Moulton, the floor is yours.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that introduction. I don't have the honored credentials of the previous two speakers, so the introduction is quite short, but I'm grateful in any event. I was made aware of this this forum, the symposium, only on Monday. I didn't have to prepare a lot, because this has been a topic that has been dear to my heart for probably about 30 years. I'm a clinical psychotherapist, and as you said, a certified stress management consultant. A lot of people that I find get into this line of work enter it because they were looking for answers to their own questions. And I'm one of those people. And I had a lot of questions when I was a much younger man, probably back in the 70s and the 80s. And I started into this because of that. And I was attracted to it because I thought that there was some value in it. I have listened very intently and with a lot of curiosity to what has been spoken before. And I understand all of what has gone before with the previous two speakers, with Dr. Benjamin and Mr. Langdon, but I want to come at it from a slightly different angle, all while encompassing and associating myself with the remarks that have already been spoken this evening. I look at it from the point of view that I call it the wound when we speak about the young men, and when we speak about mature men who were young men, when we speak about men, period, most men, I call it the wound. And that wound comes from, in my studies and my view of it, and the work that I've done on this over the last couple of decades, I see it as a wound that comes from having an absentee father. Now, let me be clear. When we talk about an absentee father, I'm talking about a father who was absent emotionally. So you could have a father that comes home. Certainly, if you can have a father that comes home every evening from work, 5:30 right on the dot, walks in the door, or 6 o'clock right on the dot, and is home with the family every evening. He might be physically in the house, but if he's emotionally absent, then the son is going to develop a wound. Certainly, if the father isn't there physically in the house, and there's no substantive male role model for the young boy to have interaction with, then he's also still going to suffer from having an absentee father. Now, when we talk about the absentee, when we talk about this, I see it as then the boy grows up and he has no direction. And when I talk about direction, let's be reminded that there are only three things that we do as humans. There are only three. We think, we feel, and we behave. That's pretty much it. Now, but when I say we think, we feel, and we behave, these are the three fingers on my right hand. Now, there are three fingers over here in my left hand. So these three fingers, I think I pretty much brought everybody on the planet, 7.5 billion people, down to three fingers on my right hand. But what do these three stand for? These stand for people, places, and things, which is pretty much all there is on planet Earth. people, places, and stuff. So it's how we interact, it's how we engage, it's how we think, feel, and behave. Behavior can be subdivided into actions and reactions, by the way. But it's how we think, feel, and behave in relation to those people, places, and things that dictate the quality of our life, that dictate the level of our stress. And when we grow up with an absentee father and we don't have that direction, then we're not getting the direction, we're not getting the instruction on how we can better think, feel, and behave in relation to the people, places, and things. And this then creates the larger situation, which means that these young boys and teenagers and then adult men become marginalized, confused. They feel a lack, and a lack of many things. So this results in unresolved pain. It results in that need to belong, that need to be desired, and that's a human trait. We don't have to be wounded males to have that need to desire. Every human, whether you're a male or a female, we at some levels, different levels at different times in different ways, have that need to be desired. But that need to belong and that need to be desired is compounded and accentuated as a result of this wound that males have from having an absentee father, emotionally absent. So that also results then, what we have to do is we have to guess about what it is to be a man. And we take what we can get from where we can get it, and it's not usually the best source of information and role modeling that we can have, but we do what we can with what we've got, because we recognize that we need to get through and we need to grow up and get on. So the other thing that this results in, this wound from having an emotional absentee father, is we don't have the proper rites of passage. And going out and having sex with a teenage girl, your girlfriend in school, or the girl next door, or somebody else, or whatever it happens to be, losing your virginity is not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the rites of passage. There is so much more about that, and through the ages, through the millennium, in fact, various different cultures all over the world, whatever time scale you want to engage in throughout the world, every culture has or has had and still has those rites of passage that would want to be engaged from the adult males into the teenage males who are now coming up to be young men. And we find that that's not happening at the rate, the width, or the depth that it needs to be in order to correct this situation. So the plan is then that men then need to learn how to release, how to be able to let go of that image of his father, whatever image he has, however faint or even non-existent, but imaginary it might be. And when we can release that image of our father and just see him as just another man, we start to heal that wound that we have developed through having an absentee father. Now, I haven't heard of the expression the man box before, and I wrote that down on a piece of paper here, and I'm going to investigate that, Dr. Benjamin, a little bit more, because I think that's an excellent way to be able to describe what we're talking about here this evening. But the plan is that we need to be able to learn how to express ourselves. But how can I express myself if I don't know who I am, if I don't know myself? So when we talk about taking care of self, that's exactly what we need to do, but we have to be reminded that we're not taught how to do that. And therein lies the next larger problem as we get to that stage, then as we go through our teenage years and into our younger adult years. So we grow up angry. Somebody was talking, one of the people were talking about earlier about, the alcohol and the drug use. So we grow up angry. We're not sitting in the gallery in the evening or in our bedroom at night, having an intellectual conversation. I think I feel angry because I have an absentee father. We're not having that intellectual conversation with ourselves, usually. Some do, but most don't. But it's there in our subconscious mind. We know that there's something missing, and we're angry because we feel that we're not getting all that we require. Even though that's not a conversation we would have with ourselves, that's what's happening in the background. So we grow up angry, we grow up confused. Somebody offers us a drink, a joint, some form of drug. When we're a teenager, we take that drug, probably more from peer pressure than anything else, or just maybe blatant curiosity. But we get high, or we get drunk, we get high, and it makes us feel good. So we go back for more because, we grow up angry and confused. We're upset. And I did this thing, I smoked this joint, I drank this rum, and I felt good. So you know what? Now I found something that makes me feel good. Why would I want to continue to feel bad if I can do something that makes me feel good? And then, of course, that whole cycle just starts to proliferate itself, and then we become substance abusers. One more point I wanted to make that I heard that ticked something in my mind. There was some discussion earlier about the expression of emotion and crying. Well, yes, as men, we're told, we have to, we have to be all macho and not to cry. But I often tell my clients, and I must say that I'm here in the UK, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. I lived in Barbados. I'm Canadian by birth, but I lived in Barbados for 17 and a half years, almost 18 years. I've been here in the UK now 9 years. And I don't mind saying on a recorded video that I'm desperately homesick for Barbados anytime I can get back. I consider it to be my home. I don't want to live in Canada anymore. But when I speak to over the years I've been doing this, when I speak to my male clients in different parts of the world, whether it's in Canada, the West Indies, here in the UK, in Africa, where I've done some work, in the Middle East as well, I look back at my client files, and I have, on a regular basis, on a quarterly, semi-annual basis, I have 55% men and 45% females attending my surgery, my private clinic. And that tells me something as well. But I often tell people, men and women both, that crying is an expression of emotion. We're allowed to express some emotions, but we're not allowed to express others. And as men, we're told, just stuff it and move on. And of course, we know that that's the wrong thing to do. That's not a positive thing to do at all. So crying is a good thing. And I'll tell you this, just to end off my session, and I appreciate the opportunity to come in here this evening and share my thoughts, and I hope I've been able to provide some value. But, in our private time, I would have to imagine that everybody on this call, every male and every female on this call, at some point in their life, has sat down and had a good cry, either by themselves or maybe supported by somebody that they trust to do that with. And you know, after we've had a good cry, don't we feel better? Don't we just kind of feel better? So I thought that maybe what we ought to do is we ought to write to the Prime Minister and get them to designate a national cry day, have a bank holiday, have a national, everybody stay home and have a good cry. We come out the next day, everybody's going to feel so much better. Isn't that going to be the truth? And a lot of problems might disappear for a period of time. I said something in the chat earlier when you were speaking, Doctor, that you know, what we do is the system tends to concentrate its efforts on the symptoms and not the cause, and that in itself is the problem that the system presents. So I'm going to end it there. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to come in, and I hope I've been able to provide some value. Thank you very much. My name is Chess Moulton, and I'm the Stress Master. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moulton. Now we have a few questions, both inside the chat and outside. We're going to take a few minutes and ask our panelists to address them. We'll see how best we can utilize the time. Our first question was directed at Mr. Hanif. And it says, what are some of the practical self-help or prevention strategies for managing stress?
Could you repeat for me?
Some of the practical ways or preventative measures for managing stress.
I think the stress master spoke to or alluded to some of those things in his presentation there. So if I could add anything, I definitely think that men needs to just be able to express oneself. I think in the first instance, that's the most practical of things that can be done to manage stress. Stress is not, stress is normal. Let me put it that way. Stress is a normal thing. I think the challenge we have is what we do with the stress when it comes and the type of stress that comes. For men, we hold on to the stress, which makes it dangerous because we don't channel it anywhere or to anyone or to get somebody to help us to deconstruct the stress. And to me, that is the challenge. So on the base, being able to express oneself in a free and healthy way is a definite beginning.
Could I just lend my voice to that for just a moment by just giving some information to the person who asked that question? There are 4 high frequency categories that people's stress resides in: communication, motivation, relationships, and planning. And the people over the years who have come into my private practice and where I've gone to make presentations in rooms full of people, when they tell me what their stress is, it fits into one of, some of, or all of those 4 categories. And of course, then the solution resides in those 4 categories as well. But having said that, as Dr. Benjamin has said, stress is a good thing, but that's the positive stress. There's also negative stress, which I think is probably what the question is probably wants to be addressed as the negative stress. There are 4 stressors, negative stressors: time management, anticipation, situation, and encounter. And that's just how it works for everybody, including men.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question from Kezron Walters. Is there any correlation between all of these stimuli and male underachievement? Said males are outnumbered when it comes to higher learning.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't get it.
Is there a correlation between all the stimuli and male underachievement? Males are generally outnumbered when it comes to higher learning.
Well, I could lend my voice briefly there. I'm no scientist in this arena, but what I can say is I find or what I have found in my practice and working with young people in general, again, it goes back to culture. And for a long time, boys, again, were more of the outside kind of thing, and the girls were more of the inside type of situation. And what we've had happening is that girls naturally...
Mr. Hanif, your mic came off. If you could just put it back on.
Somebody muted me. I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so you were saying girls up usually?
Right, naturally, based on adolescent and brain development, girls tend to develop faster in relation to academia and all these other things. And because of the way we culture boys and have boys more outside, less emphasis is placed on academia with boys, you find that girls naturally progress forward. And then you have to also consider the other stimuli in the environment that boys go through, in terms of by the time they are ready to really launch into academia, it is later on in their adolescent life, because they would have still not been there yet, while girls would have been there very earlier than boys. The general thing, according to Erikson, Freud, Piaget, is about 2 to 3 years advanced. So a boy who is 11 years and a girl who is 11 years, she would have already been 3 years advanced in terms of how she viewed the world and education and stuff, when he's still playing and having fun.
Okay, anything that you would like to add, Mr. Moulton or Mr. Langdon?
No, I quite agree with the context. I think that socialization early for women, for young girls, given the Caribbean context in which how men are prepared, is different. Women are prepared for structured learning at an early age, and we can see that manifesting. And I think as well the commitment of women to change the gender circumstance as it relates to their need for achievement, that has also motivated women to move further into more to academia, further to express themselves. I think what we're seeing is a balancing out of what would have happened earlier in society, where there were restrictions on women in terms of their academic and social development. Those are being removed. Women are more empowered. So we're seeing that manifest. As well, I think they understand the context of educational achievement from in their social and economic context. Well, that has not been the same for men, or men have not been investing the same way. Men have been looking for other avenues for investment, economically and socially. And it is part of the developmental context psychologically that has as well led to that. But I agree, early on, the psychological development impacts that, but it equals out as it gets older. So that head start really doesn't manifest in terms of when you go university in my regard. So that's really my thought on that.
Okay, thank you. We're discussing a lot of causation as well as intervention techniques or ways of dealing with issues. Mr. Langdon, you mentioned it in passing, that is of men dealing with relationship. I got a question. Someone wants to know how men should deal with when they get horny. When they get horny, yes. Horny, as in they're cheated on. What you know, how does a man cope with that in the context of he's speaking of? He hasn't learned how to deal with stress or emotional state. Maybe he has an absentee father, so he doesn't know how to deal with those issues. In the discussion, what can you what can you tell the persons in our discussion today concerning that?
I'm gonna try to be professional about this. The reality is, like all relationships, they're good and bad relationships. Relationships come to an end. Some are planned for, some are not planned for. I think that we as men, we as individuals, and it's really to highlight men in that context, because as I mentioned, we see how men react in the context of suicide and the context of gender-based violence. That has traditionally, they see the woman as a possession. A woman is not a possession. First, let's deal with that. She is not a possession. She can do as she feels like. She can do freely with her mind and her body and her soul. She can decide who she can give her love to. The onus is on you to understand the relationship and the context you have with the woman, and for you to invest aptly to see that. But we also, as men, need to see the warning signs early when the relationship is not going down the context that we want. And we need to make sure that we're measuring the progression of our relationships. And we need to be honest with ourselves. Sometimes we know these relationships are over, but we for whatever reason, we think that we can't let go. But I think we need to think about the consequences of our actions as well. And when we think about the consequences of our actions, we would understand that the investment, we would understand that the best thing sometimes to do is move on. You can find another lover. There are many, believe it or not, there are so many women out there. There's so many other partners out there. Just don't limit yourself into that context.
Well, maybe it's difficult for those persons to see that in the moment. I don't know, Mr. Hanley, because I want to ask you if in your walk through the prisons, if persons there had any similar situation there because of issues originating in that kind of.
Are you asking me that? That question is to me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Right. As a matter of fact, I know Master Chess wanted to jump in there. Maybe he'll have an opportunity to do so as well. I just wanted to walk a step back to add on to what Mr. Langdon spoke about, because again, when I look at things, I look at things from a hawk eye or a continuum perspective. And again, the horn is just the catalyst really for the challenges. The challenges came long before the horn. The challenges is really an inability to accept the emotion of stress, to accept how you see and treat people. All of the reaction is loss, how you deal with loss and grief, because in some instances, people believe as if you would say someone died, that is how they behave. Possession. And again, I want to go back to the man box, because that is where it started. It started when we teach children how to respect and what is respect to our girls and our people. It also goes back to the examples that we set for our children as when they grow up. They see father treating mother in a particular direction. We teach the boy what he should become, and we teach the girl what they should expect. And so, yes, while there is the finality, because I spoke about murder-suicide, which is a real thing in Guyana and a real thing here and in other parts of the Caribbean as well. And that tends to come from a man or a person who have not understood emotion. I told the Attorney General in Trinidad and Tobago the other day that you cannot legislate emotions. You could put $1 million fine and 2,000 years in jail, but when your emotion has become dysregulated and you cannot control that emotion, no amount of fine will stop you. You will commit your crime and you will sit down with the gun or the knife and wait for the police to arrive, or you will call them yourself. It speaks to your level of emotion and your ability to control that emotion. Telling a man to walk away or telling a woman to walk away in the height of that makes no sense, because they're just not going to hear you. And so the other thing I want to say about that, though, is I am developing a theory, a 360-degree theory, because we treat this from a 180 perspective. And what is a 180 perspective? And people always get upset with me when I say it, but I really don't care. We treat it from a woman-only perspective. And we don't understand that in a situation, if you do not examine 360 degrees with both the man and the woman, we will never get to the end result. we will never get, because if we don't understand why men do what they do when they do it, we will not be able to teach younger men what to look out for and how to prepare for disappointments in life. We know very well in that 360 the woman's role, not all, but we know, and I have seen situation, a young man came out of jail, my office is 20 minutes from Golden Grove, and he came straight to my office. The woman took out a restraining order against him. She came to his house with a knife, and when he tried to take the knife from her, she was grazed and he got 6 months. Think about that for a moment. Think about that, because he got a girlfriend. Think about that for a moment. I know Chessmaster wanted to jump in there.
Well, when we talk, well, you know, it's funny. The original question talking about, well, I won't use the basic slang, but when there's, you know, when the man has a female partner and she's cheating on him, and of course, remember what I said. You know, one of the 4 categories where stress resides is relationships, and that's relationships. There's a level of what comes up for me when I heard that question first proposed is trust and rejection, and those are 2 big issues that these same males that we're discussing this evening. For those males, those are 2 big issues that have confounded them and have followed them negatively through their life. So when they grow up and they finally think that maybe they have some control over something, or they try to get control over something so they can feel, you know, so they can feel as if they have control, they can feel their own worth, and have some sense of themselves, and only to be betrayed once more from trust, and then, of course, you can say rejected. Does it make any wonder that, you know, things spiral out of control? That's all I have to say.
Okay, moving along to our next question. Mr. Kofi Hines, I'm asking this, Mr. Kofi Hines. Men are often good at masking their state of mind, and have encountered situations where men were in distress, unknown even to those close to them. Are there any strategies or approaches that peers can use to support or even recognize distress in their friends, that's male friends, without entering into what we in the Caribbean as men consider uncomfortable conversations?
That's for me?
Well, any one of you can answer. So you can answer as well, yes.
Well, again, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I just go back to the, you know, it's the same thing over and over again. When we're experiencing stress, where is that stress? It's in the lack of our ability to communicate. It's in our lack of ability to be able to get motivated and stay motivated. It's in our lack of ability to have functional, healthy relationships. And it resides in a lack of planning, which I find when we dig down into that particular category, it seems to be a lot of goal setting.
Yeah, I think he was asking more. So how can I, as a person, recognize that in my friend? You know, what a manifestation of it is stress? What would it look like? How would I recognize that in my friend?
How would you recognize it in your friend? Well, again, if they're modifying, or if they're changing the way that they either think, feel, and or behave, if you see some shift in that, then there must be something going on. So then it's a matter of just engaging them and having some conversation.
Okay, Mr. Hannah, if I see shaking your head.
Let me tell you. I'll tell you this story real quickly. I like to give stories. I go to the barber. I used to go to the barber.
Sorry, Mr. Lambert.
Quickly. I used to go to the barber. I beg your pardon?
Continue.
I used to go to the barber on a Sunday evening, and I found it was so vile and loud. And I said, you know what, it bothers me. And then one day I sat and I listened. And I recognized it was actual therapy going on in the barbershop on a Sunday evening. Even though they were crass and they were loud, they were talking to each other about the multitude of problems they have at home, the multitude of problems they had with their boss and their girlfriends and their children, because they created their own safe space in their own language, in their own way, that they communicated their own challenges. And sometimes we look too much for a traditional type of setting. And sometimes I have a problem with you open a building and man going in a building to sit down to tell nobody about no problem. Like you, chess master, the ratio is 80 to 20 in terms of men to woman who comes to my office for therapy. And the 20 who comes has been dragged by the woman most times. So we have to consider, when you're looking at how we can help, the football game that you just play in the evening, the going by the bar and have a drink, while some people may see it as a negative thing, might in fact be a therapeutic thing for that man, right? Chilling, going and play chess, draft, whatever you do with the boys is sometimes the thing that is holding many families together. Because the conversation is so difficult to have, but we find a way from a cultural perspective to have that conversation without feeling the burden of having the conversation.
Right. So really that really goes to the safe space again. And safe space is not just necessarily a physical space, it's a mental space as well. And the context is the person spoke to the masking of it, but it reflects on masking it where, masking it when, and masking it how, and masking it with whom. I like the idea of the barbershop because this is something that is true with in the Caribbean male context. The barbershop, the strip club, the spaces that are not traditionally suited for therapeutic interventions are the places where they're most likely to let their guard down. The question you have to ask yourself is, how well do you know the individual that you think you know? The stress master talked about more in the context of behavior. The individual spoke specifically about masking. The reality is you have to, if the context of, and Benjamin and Hanif spoke about it, when we ingrain in our society that mental health needs to be taken out of the counselor and into a wider national context and into everything that we do, then we will see that improvement. Then we will see that unmasking by the individual in safe spaces. This is why this safe space concept is a very important. I keep saying to my barber, that I mention you in every single thing that I do, because it is there where I hear men discuss their challenges. What happens is that in the specific context, me being a professional, they will drag me aside and have the conversations with me in a private setting. Those situations are opportunities that we need to utilize, that we need to invest some time in to help with the unmasking of men and some of their challenges mentally.
And so what I'm hearing also is that those spaces are places that can be used to help to alleviate some of the stigma that is associated with mental health. So my next question would have to be, what else can we add to that to help to remove some of the stigma that is attached to mental health, especially within the Caribbean context? Certainly, I think discussions like this one would help, in getting the public more accustomed to discussing such topics. But what else can you add?
I think what we're seeing, I think our younger people, there's an investment in them in terms of mental health wellness. I think that for ourselves, we started a program in our organization where we started at these small things: time management, stressors related to academics and schools, That's how we started introducing the idea of maintaining mental health. These are everyday stresses like the stress master mentioned. So when you start normalizing it in the normal context, that there's help for you as an individual, even for those basic needs, then it begins to spread in the societal context. Then we start to have conversations about mental health in the broader context. You build the culture to say it's okay to discuss these things. It's okay to seek support. And that is really the direction we need to invest in. If people are going to really break out of this context that it is that I'll say that you're going to the madhouse, that you're going on that strange wing. That is the context that we have to speak of it. We have to speak as mental health, wellness, and support. And mental illness is not we all have some mental maladaptation that we have to address. It is the context in which we address it that's important.
Yeah, I heard some commentary this week that basically said the same how we get checkups every year for everything else in our body, we should also have mental checkups.
And so, Thorpe, you are quite correct. And I wanted to add to what my colleague Langdon is saying. I am a firm believer that if we decentralize mental health treatment throughout your countries, for example, you shouldn't have to go to a special place for mental health treatment. You shouldn't have to go to a special wing or corner. Make mental health just like anything else. You could walk into the hospital, the health center, and receive any kind of health services. I think that just like we do health work in schools, mental health should be part. Anytime we try to segregate, we will be causing problems. Make mental health accessible across the board, integrated into the general health system, and there will be a natural movement away from the stigma. Because now when you go into that hospital, no one knows what you are going for.
Very, very, very important. Integration is very, 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 very important. Next question. This specifically geared towards the stress master, but of course I would expect response from anyone. The stress master mentioned that about absentee fathers. The question said, what about working mothers who are also emotionally absent? Which is more damaging to the child? No emotion from the father or no emotion from the mother?
I have been asked about mothers even just within the last 24 hours, believe it or not. I'm not an authority. I don't know anything about the relationship between the mother and the child. My studies and my experience, my research has brought me down the path of the father and the son, not the mother and the son. So I really can't speak to that other than to say that I'm sure that there are absentee mothers as well, and we know that there are, but how that affects them, probably the same way, but differently. There is a certain natural bond that must be brought together between a father and a son. That's all I can say.
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
There is definitely, in terms of attachment, when you talk about the attachment theory, an attachment between child and parent or caregiver. And when I say caregiver, any child after 2 months with someone new will consider that person to be the primary caregiver. When you have, I want to also reiterate, somebody said it earlier, absent doesn't mean outside of the home. I think it was Stress Master who said it. And that applies both to mother and father. They could be at home yet absent. Absence of emotion is a dangerous thing for a child, for anyone, because two things are happening as a child grows. Sigmund Freud indicated that a child's personality comes into shape beginning around age 7. Children learn their emotional cues from their environment, from their social environment. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, the ecological model, speaks to that. And so if the environment is unable to provide the emotional support that the child needs, then the child will take their emotional cues from within, and because they are a child, they have not developed that emotional stability, so they will take emotion from wherever they can. They are sponges. And therefore, that is what is going to shape their personality as they grow. And that is why I said a lot of times, people say, but you have your mother and father at home. But having mom and dad at home is not the answer. Having mom and dad at home who is emotionally available is a critical component. And so children who grow up without that emotional connection tend to develop whatever they can from whomever they can in order to survive. And because the brain only function is survival, survive they will. And that survival may be negative, it may be juvenile delinquent linked, it may be traumatic, but to survive, the brain will find a way. I hope I was able to answer there.
Yes, and just to add to your response, I tend to often want to share this with the statistics when I'm in forums like this. Fathers in the home, they have a bigger bearing on the outcome of children. The studies, the research I've seen, it shows that children are less likely to engage in active behavior if a father is present in the home. They're more likely to stay in church and all other positive behaviors associated with an individual. They are more likely to be maintained when a father is present. And not only a father, like for single mothers, once a male presence is there, a positive male presence, that also plays a major role in the outcome and development of a positive individual. Our next question: how can emotional childhood trauma or neglect be identified and dealt with in adulthood from a self-help perspective and in clinical therapy? So this person is talking a lot about self-help.
Could you repeat for me?
How can emotional childhood trauma or neglect be identified and dealt with in adulthood from a self-help perspective and clinical therapy?
So self-help, that's a loaded and powerful question, because that is the crux of what we do. And I am a firm believer in who we are as an adult is closely linked to who we were as a child and what are our combined lived experiences as a child. When trauma enters the childhood realm, the body or the brain, as I indicated earlier, decides how we are going to survive this. So the amygdala jumps in, the fight or flight freeze jumps in, and so the body begins to see life from a trauma lens perspective. That is how people grow. I want to say, Dr. Nadine spoke about the bear in the forest. And she said, when the bear is chasing you, your body heightens, your cortisol going, you're sweating, your heart beating, and so you're running from the bear. And that's okay. But hear what? When the bear leaves, your body goes back to homeostasis. But the problem, to answer the question, is when the bear remains following you for the rest of your life, what happens? And what happens here is you now begin to live life from that perspective. So you're always hyper vigilant, or the Caribbean, we call it, you're always jumpy. You're always stressed out. You don't know why. You're never able to form proper relationships or lengthy relationships. You're not able to keep a job. Or on the flip side, you become an overachiever. You become very stressed out with situations that ordinarily would not stress you out. Those are what happen when you are triggered from a child and have not received help. So when you talk about self-help, you're talking about, one, being able to identify the emotion and what it has and is doing to your existence. Stress Master spoke about 3 things on the right hand. The brain, how you think, how you feel, and how you act. And I will tell you this, what you think, you believe it, and what you believe, you become it. And in order for people to get away from that, from that perspective that you're talking about, you have to begin to change the way you think, which will ultimately change what you believe, which will ultimately change how you behave. And so if you want to begin work, you must begin here from the mind. You need to understand what is going on, because I'll tell you this talk. Too many of us live in the traumatic incident and have not moved to the traumatic recovery. So our life is based on the traumatic incident. When I told a client, I cannot unrape you, she was moved by that. She was like, how could you say it? But the fact is, I cannot grow back a limb. I cannot receive the water from the hurricane 3 years ago. These things has occurred, it ended. But yet we live there, and that has now shaped who we become. And so in order to change who we become, we must begin to think about how and what occurred then is doing to us. And once we change that thinking, we begin to change our belief system. And once we begin to change our belief system, our action will change.
Well said, Mr. Hanif. I see you're itching to say something, Mr. Langdon.
I just want to add, the problem is that what chances have is that this trauma, everybody thinks that they are not impacted on it. We as human beings are impacted by trauma every day from the day we're born. Okay? The problem is discussions like these help to sensitize individuals to the idea how they're impacted by trauma. I believe that there are many people who are going to have this conversation who might be listening that might not have the profession, that will realize that, hey, I have received trauma. This trauma has impacted how I behave, how I interact. Many people might see the progress of the overachiever. I'm glad for that example. Many think also that trauma can manifest in what we consider negative.
I was glad for that example as well.
Also led to overhyperization of things what we consider positive. And this is one of the things that we need to look at when we discuss trauma in a broader context. How to look at, and it's only when we are having conversations like these, or we make forums like these on a broader spectrum, do people really understand, hey, maybe this what happened to me in the past has impacted the way I behave now. And that is the context we need to have a discussion with regards to self-help. What a friend of mine, you can't fix it if you don't know what it is, or if you can't name it. It might just be there, but by identifying this is something that every human being is affected by or impacted by, then with the normalization that something can be done.
Okay, since we are talking about trauma, as persons in the mental health profession, we do a lot of introspection all the time. So for persons in the webinar tonight who may have just received information about early childhood trauma, and they're remembering something, and they're probably putting two together and be like, hey, I'm acting this way, or I act this way because of the situation, because this happened to me when I was a child. How can we what are some words of encouragement you can give, or some tidbits you could give to persons who may be experiencing that kind of mindset right now, to help them to be able to maintain some sort of equilibrium, when they end the call tonight, and we, persons who are recognizing right now that I am behaving a certain way because of this trauma. What are some tips or some information we can give them right now?
The first thing I would want to say to people is the trauma has ended. The trauma has ended. And recovery is a real thing. Recovery is real. Sometimes recovery is a frightening thing. And it is frightening because we probably don't know how to. So we think that living in the trauma is the best option. But trauma is treatable. Trauma is treatable. If you recognize that your life has been altered, is being altered due to some traumatic incident, reach out to someone. Reach out to someone. The first line is saying to yourself that I need help. Too often, because of the stigma associated with mental illness, we don't want to talk about it. We're going to battle it alone. We automatically become Superman and Superwoman. No. Trauma is very common. And if you look at 84 people on this session tonight, over 60% of us has experienced some form of trauma in our life already. And out of that, many of us are living with that trauma right now. So understand your trauma. We're not discounting it, but understand it for what it is. But also understand that it has passed. And understand that it is treatable. And you could begin to build a new life. I don't like to say get a normal, because sometimes I have to help people create a new normal because the old normal just wasn't working. And that's okay as well. I will turn over to my colleague, Stress Master.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to follow up just briefly. So, stress is the cause of, or the result of, most of what's wrong with us today. So, if we've had trauma in our life, then we have to ask ourselves a very simple question. How is that trauma influencing the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave? And if we're not happy with the way we're thinking and or feeling and or behaving, then we need to get some help, seek help, in order to make some modifications. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Mr. Langdon, anything you'd like to add?
Not much, to be quite honest with you. Hanif said 60%. I believe all of us have experienced trauma. I do. That's just my personal feeling. Not personal. I know we have. I just want people to recognize that, yes, you've had a traumatic experience. Look at your strengths. Look at what positive things you've accomplished in your life despite trauma. Start with realizing that you've lived through it, you've accomplished positive things, and try not to linger on the hateful aspect of the trauma. Try not to be angry or linger in the past of the trauma. See how you can become stronger now that you've realized that this trauma has impacted you in that way. Have the conversations. I said it because depending on the type of trauma, seek out a professional or a trusted individual to discuss the trauma with. Because I don't believe we should discuss trauma with every single individual. because that person might not be bringing it in the context that is apt for your situation. I think professionals and persons who provide counseling because of the broader experience of different traumas or addressing different traumas can provide a more hands-on approach. And one of my final add-on will be that people deal with trauma in different ways. You might have your own special way that you need to develop to deal with your trauma.
It is often said that one should seek to understand that which they fear. So too, we should try and understand our trauma, and by doing so, we could able to, get past it. Before I ask another question, I'm going to ask the audience if anybody would like to probably unmute their mic and ask a question that they may have burning inside. So if anybody has a question that they didn't type inside the chat box and you would like to ask right now, did I see somebody? Okay, so as I ask this other question, you could probably prepare a question.
Hello,
Okay.
can you hear me?
All right, I see Susan Samuel.
Yes,
Susan, all right. Ask a
Samuel.
question.
I'm not really asking a question, I'm just making a comment, but where I work, I'm mainly surrounded by women, okay? It's basically a women place. And the few men that are there, I find that they don't exhibit this, this stressful attitude as do the women. To me, they seem to cope better than the women, because I must say, I myself too sometimes get that way. But my coping methods, I don't know if it can relate to the men, but for my coping methods, I generally get quiet, go to a quiet place, sort myself out, maybe say a little prayers, because I know that helps me, and just put myself in a different place than where I am at the moment. Okay, I don't know if that is strange or what, or that is funny or what, but that is how I cope. But the men now, they seem to just run through the day and just happy. I don't know if it's a cover or whatever, and just go about their own sweet business, no stress. So I don't know if anybody can tell me if that is wrong, that is right, that is the wrong way of doing it or whatever. Over. Can anybody say?
Thank you so much for your comment.
Just a quick gaffe that maybe things that stress them are not at work.
Oh, okay, that might be true. That definitely might be true.
Are they masking it? Are they masking it? But to be honest with you, I stress. We tend to focus on negative stress.
Okay.
So stress manifests negatively. It's not usually the stress or the stressor that is negative. It's the way you deal with the stress that is negative.
Okay.
Yeah. So some people might be dealing with a different way in a different context that might not be manifested before your eyes, but manifested in some other contexts. That's basically it.
I can agree with that. Maybe that's true.
And
not showing it at work, but then go ahead.
I would say it goes back to socialization as well. Men, even if they stress out about something, if they have been brought up in a space where, men don't normally express stresses at work, then it becomes part of, them.
Okay. But I had put a question in there to you, Mr. Thorpe, in private. But since you're here, let me ask, is this, will we get any sort of credits, those credits or whatever that they give when we do these little sessions? Or a little certificate or what that you get, that you have to do to show that you're doing something knowledgeable now to get your license renewed. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm not certain. Kesley is probably the one that would be able to answer that question.
Okay, but then concerning the presentations, would we get that? The PowerPoint presentations then? Would it be possible?
Mr. Langdon, would you be sharing your PowerPoint presentation?
I'll just review it before I send it, but that's no problem.
All right, so that's not a problem. Thank you so much for your comments.
I put my email in the chat just in case.
All right, thank you. Anyone else has any further question? So we just have a few minutes remaining. Any other question? There's a few minutes away from that. Yeah, you're gonna ask a question or and
yeah. I want to ask a question, just to generate a little bit of discussion before we wrap up. This is for anybody on the panelists. The term masculinity, we spoke about that as well. The question is, has the term masculinity, has it changed, or was the definition wrong to begin with? That's my question. Has the term changed, or has the definition been wrong from the very start?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know if it was wrong from the start, nor has it changed. I think it has its place just like femininity. And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with celebrating one's being in terms of masculinity or femininity. I think the challenge for me is we have kind of, again, I'm going back to the box, we have put what that meaning of masculinity should be in. And we somehow put a strong man with 6 abs, 6 feet, chocolatish, as masculinity. And anybody else, for example, I'm round. I've always been round. I mean, I'm trying to get a little less round, but I've always been round. So I would not fit into that box. I think for me, masculinity is what it is, but we have placed a meaning to it. And I think that is what needs to change, if anything.
The question, Kelsey, I'm gonna say the question is there's a difference between what we as professionals or what we as when we define what masculinity is to what the picture of masculinity is in everybody's thought. Masculinity, I'll say this. I think we should be proud about being masculine, and we should wear it on our shoulders. We should wear it as proudly, but we need to defend about those things that are wrong. It's not about being masculine. Those things that are wrong that have been done and said that has been linked to masculinity, which is not of masculinity, and those things that are right of being masculine. And that is all that has happened. There were a lot of negative things that were associated with the box definition of masculinity. That is not true. Masculinity is a broader context. It's our emotional, our psychological, how we deal with our partners, how we deal with others. We really don't discuss that as much in our masculine definition, a lot of masculine thoughts or lots of thoughts of masculinity.
Yeah, I often say one thing that is linked to masculinity is strength and aggression. And everybody wants a man not to be aggressive until they're on a date walking down the road and a bad dog is coming their way. Suddenly you want the man to be aggressive and go in protect mode. So it's not for you to do away with the masculinity, but know how to use it effectively. Go ahead.
Yeah, could I just quickly weigh in on that? We have to be allowed to choose our definition for ourselves of what masculinity is. But having said that, we must be careful not to fall into the trap of taking responsibility for that choice and not having a list of things to be able to choose from. And again, it comes from that ignorance that we have because we didn't have anybody to teach us to be able to tell us about that in our formative years. So it's not a good thing to give somebody a choice when they haven't been taught or given a list on what to choose from. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yes, it indeed it does. I saw Casey put on her camera a while ago. Were you going to ask a question, Casey? All right, doesn't seem that way. Yeah.
Well, I just had a question about what are some good mental wellness tips for men?
So the question for 3 panelists: what are some good mental health tips for men. And even as you answer or prepare to answer, I know there are persons here from across the region. If you have phone numbers of places people can call if they want to speak to a therapist, you can put them inside the chat. And I will encourage everybody to take the numbers and share them with your friends. You have WhatsApp, let's share the numbers. Let's make, speaking to someone on mental health issues commonplace. So I know for Dada and Elika is in the chat. If you could put the number, in the chat, at least for St. Vincent, there are persons across the region here also. If you have numbers, you can place them in the chat so that persons can have a place that they can call. So to our question, mental health tips. Right ahead.
Mental wellness, Carvel, wellness.
Wellness, sorry. My bad. Mental wellness, sorry.
So this one is plan it. Plan it. You know what? You know what makes you feel good, you know what makes you feel better, you know what makes you feel bad. Plan how to maintain your mental health. Actually, I do have a tip for a wellness plan for your mental health. You know what you need to walk away. You know what makes you anxious. Who are you persons you can lean on. So you plan exactly for those situations that might make you feel more stressed or might be inhibiting your well-being, and you look at those resources that you can form on. You can look at building those coping skills. If you know you need to walk away, that stuff makes you angry and you doesn't want you to behave in a manner which would make you stress, you walk away. You call on those needs, you do those things that if going for a walk makes you feel better. If just setting down and not being in contact with unnecessary stressors makes you feel better, then you feel better. I do have an entire presentation on this wellness plans. Your challenges. Keep learning new things. That's one of the ways to keep your mind active. There are lots of little tips. Some people structure or having a routine helps. People structure their day. Exercise, mental release of exercise also. Those things can help you with your mental health. There are many ways that many people, but support networks are very important to mental health.
Mr. Hanif, any additional tips?
Be deliberate. Be deliberate about your mental well-being. We are not deliberate, we are reactive. Be deliberate in terms of taking care of yourself. Create a pause and respect that pause. When you find your stress level going up, everyone knows or should know their stress tolerance level. But if you don't know it, find it. And be able to identify when you are going up and down that stress meter and be able to take a pause. Sometimes we deal with things in a level of immediacy that don't require immediate attention. Sometimes taking a pause, dealing with yourself, your own mental space, seeing what you have to deal with, and then tackling it is going to be important. Take care of your emotions. Our emotions drive our every existence. Take care of your emotions. Our emotional self has toppled worlds and countries. Emotional intelligence is a powerful tool. Get in tune with your own emotion, because that is going to be our surviving force. I'm not sure if our stress master anything else.
I could only add, my top tip has been the same for a long time. It will remain the same for a very long time. And that is my answer to that question is just figure out what you can control and what you can't control.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, I'll give each of our panelists an opportunity just to give a closing sentence or two as we bring tonight's proceedings to a close. So just a few words, just to close, a few ending words.
Well, for me, I want to say thank you for reaching out to me and allowing me to be a part of this very important space. As we delineate mental health, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm always encouraged by these conversations. And for those of you who know me, I am an action man. So beyond the conversation, we must all now get up and do our part to remove the stigma, to fight the system, to change so that we can create a healthy way that all people, man, woman, and child, but today we're dealing with men, so I will keep it to men, to be able to come forward and be comforted with whatever they're dealing with so that they can get the help that is needed. Again, there is no shame in mental health. It is more common than you think. The World Health Organization said that 4 in 5 would experience mental health at some point. Think about it. Think about it. So there is no shame in this. Reach out, and if somebody is reaching out to you, be gracious. Change the way we speak about and to mental health so that we could normalize it to the common man, and we'll be all right. I thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much, Mr. Benjamin. Chess Master.
Yes, thank you. Well, I just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity on such short notice to be able to come in and hopefully provide some value and take part in what I think is an extremely important discussion on a very extremely important matter. I'm reminded that back in the 80s and back in probably the early to mid 90s, there was in many parts of the world what we would have called a man's movement. And I think that has been hidden and been sort of delegated down the rungs behind some of the other equally important movements that have come onto the scene over the last several years. But I think that there's an opportunity that we need to get the men's movement back in gear in different parts of the world. And I would support that effort. I'm grateful for the opportunity to come on and provide some value. Thank you very much, and bless everyone this evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moulton. Mr. Langdon, final words.
Thank you very much for having me on. What I will say is that find your safe space, whether it be mental or physical, and take the time to know what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what makes you stressed, what makes you frustrated. As the stress master says, that when you know those things, you will know what you need to do. And also, I'm running a call for men. This is beyond the mental health context. Let's truly be our brother's keeper. Huh? We talk about the context of men being absent. Let's step to the plate as men. Let's not only be there for our children, but encourage our fellow brothers to be there for our young boys and the young men to come. Let's have the discussions we need to have. Let's seek the professionals we need to seek to make us healthier. I'm tired of seeing the outbursts of violence and the way men are portrayed. We can do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Langland, and thank you again to all our panelists. And thank you to you, the participants. I still see 75 of us in here. I think it got all the way up to 90 something. So thank you so much for taking time out. I really enjoyed the discussion. I hope that we don't keep the information to ourselves. I saw a lot of numbers and email addresses and contacts up in the chat. So take them, and I want to challenge everyone to share the information that they got, and let's make mental health or wellness a part of our daily custom, language and speaking. So I'm going to hand it over back to Mr. Cambridge. Thank you very much, Kesley.
All right, so good night, everyone. Once again, I want to thank Mr. Benjamin Hanif out of Trinidad, Mr. Langdon out of Barbados, and Mr. Moulton in the UK. And I think everyone can agree that this forum was an excellent forum where we learned a lot. I'm really impressed, and I think it's really historic. I'm not going to linger too long. And of course, thank you, Colville, for moderating. On behalf of Carryman, we just want to thank the Ministry of Health, particularly Mental Health Rehabilitation Center, the psychosocial team, Ms. Solomon, Ms. Matthews, Ms. Thomas, and Ms. Ned, as well as Sister Medford, who were able to allow us to have this collaboration. And I know that this is just not the end, it's rather the beginning of something great. And I know that there are a lot of conversations that are going to happen. And just to add that the Gender Affairs Division would also be having a session tomorrow on mental health, and no, not on mental health, sorry, on health for boys and men, but it still will include mental health, of course, some aspects of that as well. And you would have the Minister of National Mobilization, a Carryman representative out of Trinidad, Mr. Kevin Liverpool, a neurologist, Dr. Dishong, and myself. We would be on panel tomorrow, and you can find that information out on the Gender Affairs page on Facebook, so you can check it out. But once again, I want to thank everyone, the participants who would have logged on. We had, as Colville said, about 80-something persons, 89 at one point. And I hope that everyone has an enjoyable night as we celebrate International Men's Day tomorrow. And hopefully this is just the beginning, and we'll have more sessions like this, especially during this COVID time. We would have to use these platforms. But thank you very much to the panelists. It was an excellent presentation by all panel members, and we hope that we would definitely hear from you. There are different numbers in the chats, and I also posted a link to the website for the Carryman's Ubuntu Symposium dealing with MenEngage. You can also register for that, as it's dealing with different men's issues. I would have posted the link, and it's being posted again right there. I see Karen all the way from Illinois in the US, Mental Bliss. Thank you for logging on. And thank you again, everyone. And of course, have an enjoyable night. This session is being recorded for purpose of being looked back again, also on Facebook. So blessings once again, and everyone have an enjoyable and safe night.